Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Washington Redskins in their Week 7 matchup played October 25th, 2015. We're going to go over the scores and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis. So starting off in the first quarter, just over 3 minutes in, Jameis Winston hits Mike Evans for a 40-yard touchdown. Connor Barth adds the extra point, and it was 7-0 Tampa Bay over Washington. Then with about 5 minutes still left in the first, Connor Barth hit a 22-yard field goal, and it was 10-0 Bucks over the Skins. So that was the score after one quarter of play. Then in the second quarter, with about 11.5 minutes left before halftime, Jameis Winston hits Dante Dye for a 7-yard touchdown. Barth adds the extra point, and it was 17-0 Buccaneers over the Redskins. Then, with a little over 8 minutes left before halftime, Howard Jones scoops up the fumble by Cousins and runs it back 43 yards for the defensive touchdown. And with the extra point by Barth, it was 24-0 Tampa Bay over Washington. So now the Redskins, down by 24, would look to mount their greatest comeback in franchise history. And it started off with about 4.5 minutes left before halftime. Still in the second quarter, Kirk Cousins takes it in himself from 8 yards out for the touchdown. Hopkins adds the extra point, and the Redskins were finally on the scoreboard with the score now 24-7 as they trailed by 17. So that was the score at halftime. Then in the third quarter, a little less than 4 minutes in, Kirk Cousins hits Ryan Grant for a 3-yard touchdown. Hopkins adds the extra point, and it was a 10-point game with the score Tampa Bay 24, Washington 14. Then with 7 minutes still left in the third, Cousins hits the tight end Jordan Reed for a 3-yard touchdown pass. Hopkins adds the extra point, and it was now a 3-point game with the score 24-21. So the Bucs had put up 24 unanswered straight points in the first half, and then the Redskins, starting off in the second quarter, scored 21 straight into the third quarter. So that was the score after 3 quarters of play. It was a 3-point game. Then in the fourth quarter, a little over a minute in, Connor Barth hit a 45-yard field goal to put the Bucs back on the scoreboard and extend their lead to 6 with the score Tampa Bay 27, Washington 21. The Redskins responded with a long drive going 63 yards and 11 plays, eating up about 6.5 minutes of game clock, and it resulted in a 35-yard field goal by Dustin Hopkins with about 7.5 left in regulation, as this was now a 3-point game at 27-24 as Washington was back within 3 as they still trailed the Bucs. Then the Buccaneers added another 3 about 5 minutes later as they ate up 5 minutes on their next drive, going 91 yards and 11 plays. They weren't able to get in the end zone, and Barth hit a 21-yard field goal with about 2.5 left to play in regulation and extend the Bucs lead back to 6 with the score Tampa Bay 30, Washington 24. So now the Redskins would get the ball and they drive downfield 80 yards and 11 plays, all of which were passing plays, as Kirk Cousins went 9 for 11 on this drive, which resulted in a 6-yard touchdown pass to Jordan Reed with less than half a minute left on the clock. So Kirk Cousins coming up clutch, and he hits Jordan Reed for the touchdown to make. And with the extra point by Hopkins, they were now in the lead by 1 with the score 31-30. So on 3rd and goal, Cousins hits Reed, and now the Redskins were in the lead for the first time in this game, up by 1. And so now after the kickoff, it was a touchback. The Buccaneers, with no timeouts, had to go 80 yards in less than a half a minute. They picked up a couple yards on the first play, 16 yards on a reception by Evans, and then another 6 yards on a reception by Bright. And so now it was 2nd and 4, and Winston ends up going across the middle as the Redskins had the sidelines covered pretty well, and he hit the running back Sims, but Sims ended up fumbling the ball, And it didn't matter anyway, because even if he didn't fumble, the game would have came to a close, as he would have been down with no timeouts. They wouldn't even have gotten another playoff, but he did fumble the ball. The Redskins recovered, and all that was left to do was for Kirk Cousins to take a knee in the victory formation, as Kirk Cousins and the Redskins pull off the biggest comeback in franchise history, having been down 24 points in the first half, and they come back to win this one by 31-30. As the Bucs just collapsed in the second half. They did put up, 6 points in the fourth quarter with those pair of field goals, but they would not make it back to the end zone in the second half. And the Redskins are now 3-4 on the season, one game below 500. They are 3-1 at FedEx there in Washington, although it is outside DC, but they have a winning record at home, the Redskins do. The Bucs 1-2 on the road, 2-4 on the season. They had this one, it looked like they had it in the bag, but they just fell apart in the second half. They started letting the comeback, up there with, 4.5 left in the second quarters. They didn't even make it to halftime before the Redskins had put some points on the board, and then they kept scoring as they scored 21 straight, although they still trailed, and then they just kept chipping away. And then finally on that last drive, Kirk Cousins, 9 for 11, leading them down the field for the go-ahead touchdown. And, of course, the extra point by Hopkins. In Tampa Bay, just, it's one of those things where it's tough to play with the lead. We saw the same thing in the game with Jacksonville and Buffalo early on this morning, although, Blake Bortles was able to lead them on that touchdown drive to get the lead back, and he of course had more time, but the Bucs with just 24 seconds and no timeouts, there wasn't enough time for Winston, and of course Sims ends up fumbling the ball anyway, even though if he hadn't fumbled it, it still would have been the last play of the game, but instead, because he fumbled it, Kirk Cousins takes the knee. But incredible performance by Kirk Cousins. 33 for 40, 317 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, although he did fumble the ball, and that resulted in a defensive touchdown for the Bucs to put them up 24-0. But then from there on out, Kirk Cousins threw 3 touchdowns. At that point, he didn't have any touchdowns. And then after that defensive touchdowns, the Redskins turned things around. Jameis Winston put up a nice stat line, 21 for 29, 297 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And Doug Martin had 19 carries for 136 yards. So the muscle hamster was having a big day. He also had 3 receptions for 35 yards, which gave him 171 total yards on the game. And for the Redskins, Matt Jones was their leading receiver with 9 carries for 29 yards. Of course, Kirk Cousins had 3 carries for 15 yards, including that 8-yard touchdown run. And then we look at the receivers. Mike Evans, 8 receptions for 164 yards, including a touchdown. And then for Washington, Jordan Reed, the tight end, 11 receptions for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the go-ahead touchdown with less than a half a minute left in the game. That ended up being the winning score. Pierre Garçon also had 5 receptions for 55 yards, and Grant had 3 receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown. Then we look at the kickers. Connor Barr, 3 for 3 on the field goals, 3 for 3 on the extra points. Hopkins, 1 for 1 on the field goals, 4 for 4 on the extra points. Then we look at the defense. And for Tampa, Smith had a sack and a forced fumble. And for Washington, Jeff Coat had a forced fumble. And Knighton and Pia each had a half a sack. We look at the team stats, 27 first downs for Washington, 21 first downs for Tampa Bay. On third down, Tampa Bay 7 of 12 on third downs, 58% conversion rate. 5 for 11 for Washington, 45% conversion rate for the Skins. And total net yards, 476 for Tampa, 355 for Washington. Net rushing yards, 190 for the Bucs, 50 for the Skins. Then passing yards netted, 305 for Washington. Cousins sacked once for a loss of 12 yards. And for the Buccaneers, 289 net passing yards. as Winston was sacked once for a loss of 8 yards. We look at the penalties. That's what really killed the Bucs in this game. This is how they lost the game. Is you look at the numbers and you go, how did the Bucs lose this game? Well, I'll tell you how they lost. 16 penalties. That's right. 16. Not 6. 16. Might as well have been 60. But 142 penalty yards for the Bucs as they really just kept making mistakes. They shot themselves in the foot, and they let a 24-point lead evaporate there in D.C. And the Redskins, just 4 penalties for 20 penalty yards. Both teams lost a fumble in this game. And we look at the red zone. And in the red zone, the Buccaneers just 1 for 3, 33% in the red zone. And the Redskins 4 for 5 in the red zone, 80% in the red zone. And on the time of possession, 31 minutes and 18 seconds for the Bucs, 28 minutes and 42 seconds for the Redskins. The Buccaneers were shutting down the run. The Redskins typically are a pretty good running team. They have been over the past few years even, but they really couldn't get anything going on the ground. But they got it going in the air. Once they were down and they just put it in Cousins' hands and they're just like, yep, just pass us out of this one. Just pass. And Cousins, he can air it out. You know, sometimes he looks bad, but other times he looks really good. And this is one of those cases where he started off struggling, but then once they get down by a lot of points, sometimes for some reason he seems to play better when they're trailing. He starts airing it out. Of course, the Buccaneers kind of falling asleep at the wheel there. It's a huge lead, and then they just let the Redskins come right back. And Cousins ends up, with 4 total touchdowns in the game, the 3 throwing and the 1 rushing. As he was definitely the MVP of this game, as he was very poised. No interceptions, and he 9 for 11 on that final drive. And comes up big with that touchdown to Jordan Reed. A big win for Washington. This win keeps them in the race there in a very tightly contested NFC East, as it's still wide open, anyone's division. In the 3 and 4, they're still in the mix of things. They're not out of it by a long stretch, as they're fighting for that division title. It could be anyone's division between Philadelphia, New York, Dallas, and Washington, and you definitely don't count them out, especially coming up with a win out of this situation, down 24, their biggest franchise comeback. That's a big thing, and if they can build upon that momentum moving forward, and even with the way that they were playing early, for them to turn things around and then to hold the Bucs out of the end zone in the second half. Of course, they only allowed the 2 touchdowns on offense by the Buccaneers. The Redskins have a decent defense. They're not bad. Of course, the running game really wasn't doing anything today, but usually the running game is better than that. But the Buccaneers, they had this one in their hands. This is a really, just a demoralizing defeat for Tampa Bay, to have victory in their hands and then just to collapse the way they did, and now to fall to 2 and 4, especially in an NFC South where the Falcons only have 1 loss and the Panthers are undefeated. So the Buccaneers are pretty well out of it there in their division. Quite the opposite of the Redskins situation, although there's just a half a game difference between the two in the record books. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It is great